So good morning to everybody. This presentation will mainly focus on the late Bronze Iron Age levels discovered at Aradetis Orgora, with the aim to present the stratigraphy of the site in light of the newly available C14 dates. The analysis of these levels, following preliminary work carried out by David Darejanaashvili in his PhD thesis defended at Ca' Foscari in 2017, and the research carried out within the SPIN 2018 project will be integrated in the wider study of the period in Southern Caucasus, which is the topic of my current PhD research. Firstly, I will concentrate on the stratigraphy and the context from which C14 samples were obtained. While briefly introducing the context, I will also present some of the most significant vessels recovered from the same loci or from contexts belonging to the same level, and draw some preliminary consideration concerning the site's pottery sequence. In conclusion, I will briefly present the data obtained from Okerakevi and Natsargora and their relations with the Aradetis Orgora sequence. Levels belonging to the late Bronze Georgian-Italian culture were investigated in both fields A and B of Aradetis Orgora. Although the two areas were devoted to slightly different functions throughout the period, it was possible to synchronize the two parallel stratigraphic sequences. As anticipated in the previous presentation, the first phase of the late Bronze Age in field A is represented by level 12, and it is marked by an abrupt increase in fast-wheel-made pottery. Level 12, which can be stratigraphically divided into two different phases, A and B, corresponds to a series of surfaces with associated evidence of fire installation. This phase corresponds to level 12 and 11 in field B, both of which are also characterized by the presence of a series of superimposed surfaces with fire installations. In both fields, this phase was investigated only over small areas, but we were nevertheless able to obtain 7 C14 dates. For field A, we obtained 4 dates, 2 from level 12B and 2 from level 12A. From level 12B, the dates come respectively from a thick mud filling dividing level 13 from level 12, and from a thick layer of burnt material made up by daub, charcoals, and burnt animal bones. For level 12A, we have 2 dates, again, coming from a mud layer dividing level 12B from level 12A, that was exposed only over a small surface, and from a layer of yellow compact soil. The pottery that was collected from this loci clearly includes the dark gray burnished pottery with geometrically incised, impressed, or burnished decoration that is typical of the Georgian-Italian culture. For field B, we obtained 3 C14 dates, all from level 11, from 3 loci that are contemporary to each other. The first came from a reddish burnt floor that was cut by ash pit 2583 and by fireplace 2571 that were built upon it. The second and the third dates come from the filling of the ash pit and the filling of the fireplace. Here again we can see some examples from the pottery collected from this loci or the context of the samples. Thanks to the dates that we obtained and the simple model that was used for both of the fields, we can place the beginning of the late Bronze Age at Aradetis Orgora toward the second half of the 15th century BC. This first phase continues until the end of the 14th century BC, as confirmed by the dates obtained in field A for the successive layer 11. If we briefly look at the pottery markers that characterize this phase, the most remarkable one is the abrupt increase in the use of fast wheel in pottery production that marks the beginning of the late Bronze Age at Aradetis Orgora. This trend is clearly visible in field A, while for field B the evidence is less decisive due to the small amount of pottery that was recovered from that area. Considering only level 12, the first level attributed to the Georgian-Italian culture in field A, the total percentage of slow wheel-made pottery is around 52%, while fast wheel-made pottery is around 43%. This data alone, if confronted with the percentage of level 13 in field A, would prove decisive for our hypothesis. However, if we look more closely to our data, we can see that the great majority of slow wheel-made pottery, around 75%, was found at the bottom of the level, while the majority of fast wheel-made pottery, around 71–72%, was found throughout all the level. In fact, it was also found at the bottom of level 12. Here we can see 3 examples of a similarly decorated chair coming from the same locus, but the left ones were made with fast wheel, while the right one was made with the slow wheel. The second phase of the Chascensi-Telgari culture that is attested at the site corresponds to levels 11, 10, and 9 in field A, and to level 10, 9, and 8 in field B. In this level, we observe a sort of monumentalization of the settlement with the construction in field A of a series of platforms devoted to activities related to animal butchering and food processing. While in field B, we witness the building of a terracing wall 2128, delimiting an open space with a complex fire installation in its center. This complex fire installation consists of a central fireplace and some smaller installation connected to it. At the northern limit of the excavated areas lies a small platform whose function is still unclear, although a ritual function was proposed for it in light of the presence of a small plaster basin containing burnt fish bones, as well as bird bones and liquid bones on top of it, and the recovery close to it of a handle bowl in the shape of a bird. From these levels, we obtain 7 C14 dates from field A, 2 from level 11 and 5 from level 9. The 2 dates from level 11 come from 2 loci that are respectively a floor cut by post holes and a compact yellowish layer in a space recognized as a disposable area for butchering activities. Here again we can see the pottery associated to these loci. The 5 dates that were collected from level 9 the first comes from a thick filling covering the whole excavated area, and that is close to the bottom of level 9. The remaining 4 loci, the first 2 are 2 superimposed floors, while the 3rd and the 4th are 2 fillings which seals this floor and divide level 9 from level 8, and are all located near the top of the level. As for field B, we have 3 C14 dates for this phase. 1 comes from level 9 and 2 comes from level 8. The date from level 9 was obtained from the filling of the main fireplace for these levels. The 2 dates from level 8 comes from the filling of a gutter and the filling of the latest fireplaces located in this space. A quick look again at the pottery collected from this loci showed that these levels belong clearly to the Chascensi-Telgari culture, and the pottery associated to it can be described as proper of the Chascensi-Telgari culture. Thanks to the model that we used, we can establish that this phase appears to be the main occupational phase of the site during the late Bronze Age, starts around the 13th century and lasts until the end of the 12th century BC. In general, the relevant pottery assemblage is characterized by a strong continuity with that from the earlier phase of the late Bronze sequence. It has, however, to be highlighted that towards the end of the phase, in level 9 of field A and in level 9 and level 8 of field B, 3 interesting elements of innovation appear in this assemblage. The first of these elements are the so-called Meli Ghele vessels, that are small, high-carinated vessels with biconical body that usually bear a corrugation between the carination and the neck. They are all chronologically located toward the end of the 13th century and the 12th century BC, and they were found neither before nor after, although some similar shape that may be defined as derivative from the Meli Ghele vessels were occasionally met with. The second element is the appearance and increasing number of open shapes, in particular of open carinated bowl and plates, either undecorated or decorated, usually with a wavy comb impression on the upper part of the body over the carination. These shapes are also attested in the later levels in the sequence and continue very well into the Iron Age levels that are dated to the 9th century BC and to the 8th century BC, as we will see in a moment. The third element is the appearance of zoomorphic handles that are usually in the shape of horned animals. These handles appear toward the top of level 9 in field A, and they start in level 8 in field B. They are also attested in all the later levels of both sequences at Aradetis Orgora until the Iron Age too. On the basis of the C14 dates obtained from the site, a possible date for the appearance of this feature can be the end of the 12th, the beginning of the 11th century BC. According to our results, it seemed that at Aradetis Orgora, at least, the 12th century marks a distinctively different phase of the Chascensi-Telgari culture, marked by the appearance of new shapes, some of which will continue to be present in the Iron Age levels and could be considered diagnostic for that period. So it would seem that a possible transition between the Chascensi-Telgari culture and what comes later, that is usually referred in literature as early Iron Age, could be placed toward the end of the 12th century and the beginning of the 11th century BC, a period that is represented at Aradetis Orgora only by level 7 of field B, that is made up by a filling and 2 mud brick walls heavily disturbed by the pits of the later level 6, which corresponds to level 8 in field A. For level 7, we have 2 C14 dates from locus 2156 that divides this level from the previous one. As it can be seen from the graph, the date obtained from 2156 E5 may represent a possible outlier, and it is the only date that showed an insufficient agreement in the simple model that we applied to both of the fields. The fourth phase of the late Bronze Iron Age sequence at the site corresponds to levels 8, 7, 6, and 5 in field A, and to levels 6, 5, 4B, and 4A in field B. For these levels, we do not have any dates, but thanks to the dates that we have for the later levels in field A and B, and to the correspondence that can be drawn between the two fields, we can establish that they are all comprised between the end of the 11th century BC and the beginning of the 9th century BC, even though we cannot say exactly when they are chronologically located. From a stratigraphic point of view, the levels in both fields show some similarities which help establishing a correspondence between the two excavated areas. Level 8 in field A and level 6 in field B are two levels of pits that clearly divide what lays below them from what lays above them in both the excavated areas. Above these two levels in both fields, we found a series of levels divided by thick pebble layers, attesting a reoccupation of these areas in a less permanent way in comparison with the previous phases, whose end is marked by a thick pebble layer upon which the Iron Age 2 levels were built. In level 7 of field A and in level 5 of field B, we located the remains of some stone structures. The overlying levels, number 6 and number 4B, were characterized by the presence of mud brick architecture, while level 5 and respectively level 4A show again the presence of mud brick architecture, but they are divided from the previous one by a layer of pebble that could have been used to level the surface and make way for the next phase. This succession of rather unclear occupational levels end with a thick pebble layer, that is locus 1362 in field A and locus 2102 in field B. From the levels overlying the thick pebble layer, we only have 3 C14 dates, 2 from field A and 1 from field B. They come respectively from the filling of a fireplace of level 3 in field A, from the filling of a pit in field A in level 2, and from a burnt surface in level 2 of field B. They date those levels respectively in the first half of the 9th century and in the first half of the 8th century BC. The pottery coming from these levels in both fields has features that, although in some continuity with the larger stages of the Chascensi-Telgari culture, clearly belong to a different cultural phase, characteristic of the Iron Age in the region, whose feature well corresponds to those which are generally attributed to the Samtavro culture. Here we can see again two examples of horned handles. Finally, in both fields, these levels are located immediately below the Hellenistic palace of level 1 that was dated at the late Hellenistic period. For the sites of Okerakevi and Natsargora, we only have 4 C14 dates for these phases, 3 coming from kurgan number 2 of Okerakevi and 1 coming from Natsargora settlement. The date from Natsargora was already mentioned by Professor Rova in her presentation, and nothing can be added about it. The dates from Okerakevi were obtained from 3 samples. 2 of them were collected from the filling of a secondary pit located northwest of the center of the kurgan, which contained 2 vessels. The third one was collected from locus 014, that is the filling of the main chamber of the kurgan, where no pottery was unearthed. ECU 51 and ECU 61 can be considered as contemporary, and their date would fit well with the vessels located in the secondary pit that are similar to the ones attested in a much fragmented way at Aradetis Orgora in contemporary levels. The third date instead gave a lower date, which is presently difficult to explain. The evidence that we have thus suggests for the kurgan a date at the beginning of the 13th century, roughly corresponding to levels 12 and 11 of field A and levels 12 and 11 of field B. This table summarizes the results obtained for the Late Bronze Age and the Iron Age in the course of our project, mainly based on the sequence of Aradetis Orgora settlement. The site of Nazargora was excluded because no usable date was obtained from it, although future study of its pottery may help to synchronize it with the Aradetis sequence. Okerakeli kurgan number 2 was tentatively considered with the first attested presence to the Chashensi-Telgari culture at Aradetis Orgora in the 14th century BC. In the end, I would like to briefly discuss three important elements that emerged from the study of the sequence of Aradetis Orgora. In Aradetis, for the Late Bronze Iron Age, in the context of a rather complete sequence, we have one clear occupational gap between the 7th century BC and the Hellenistic period, encompassing the Achaemenid period that is well attested in Georgia and in Chilkartli as well. This gap could be the result of a complete obliteration of these levels during the construction of the Hellenistic palace. We also have a phase, roughly corresponding to the 10th century BC, for which we have no radiometric dates and rather poor ceramic evidence, as it is characterized by a very troubled stratigraphy, probably caused by successive terracing operation. The second element is the fact that the C14 dates from Aradetis seems to confirm that the Late Bronze Chashensi-Telgari culture lasts until the end of the 12th century and the beginning of the 11th century BC, almost a century later than the conventional date for the end of the Late Bronze Age in the Near East. The last element that could be the topic for an interesting discussion is the fact that both the pottery sequence and the C14 dates place the appearance of the diagnostic elements of the Centauro culture only towards the very end of the Chashensi-Telgari period, confirming that the two cultures are not contemporary with each other, but rather one follows the other. Thank you for your attention.